So we already had two meetings 10 days ago on the 19th and 20th with Yulia Asperska, who was also attending the dance platform, Ukrainian dance platform in Vilnius, and who is the co-curator of the Tanzmesse. And then we also had meeting with who?
Roberto. With
Who?
Roberto. You had a meeting
yes,
with
with
Roberto.
Roberto. Yeah, with Roberto, where he also kind of shortly, we've been talking about airwaves, about the selection, about the kind of trends. And that also was interesting to know about the Italian context, and especially the context Roberto is working in, kind of his city, his organization, and yeah. So maybe you could start with shortly introduction what your work is about, and what you're doing in your work. What is your working context mostly? What is your main activity out of visiting the? I know that you've been visiting also the dance platform in Vilnius. You taught a workshop on dance dramaturgy. So let's start from your professional activity.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and yeah, sorry for all the confusions but these things happen. You know, that's life. We know life goes always this way. Yeah, so I'm Thomas. I think some of you, I mean, I don't see your faces, but I see the names. I think I have met actually in Vilnius, aside from you, Anton, of course. Yeah, I'm a freelancing dance dramaturg based in Berlin, Germany, but working actually quite across Europe. Well, mostly west, north, south, not so much east. But also a little bit beyond the edges of Europe, and yeah, work mostly also in the free dance scene. So not so much with big companies, except maybe for Carte Blanche in Norway, which is like the national dance company. I had the luck to work with them already 2 times, but I'm mostly working actually with freelance choreographers. Yeah, and as a dance dramaturg, it's basically about helping the choreographers to I don't know, you could name it in different ways. Some call it like relation management. It's kind of like the relation between the choreographer and they team, but also the audience, the relation between the artistic theme or the subject and the social context in which the work is embedded. But also it's about helping to contextualize the artistic topic, to help to research in a way, like or to give different perspectives onto a certain subject, because another colleague of mine also once called dramaturgy as a practice of deviation, meaning you have a certain aim, and sometimes dramaturgy is good to also kind of throw a few stones so that you either can kind of find maybe a different way, or you get reassured that the way that you go is right. So this kind of practice that basically helps to in different ways to reassure an artist in his day pathway in a way. Yeah, this is somehow maybe in short what the work that I actually do. Yeah.
And yeah, thank you. And actually, it's also the second question is about your about in maybe some specificity of the dramaturg works, because we've been also in our community talking already a few times about the absence of dance dramaturgy, let's call this, in Ukrainian context, and even when it's kind of happen, or we have this kind of conversation that's very very often the dance dramaturgy is discussed as very with connection in theater dramaturgy.
Yeah.
Like because we have, you know, in Ukraine we have a theater very well developed, a lot of theater companies and national, municipal, independent, whatever. And I quite understand that theater dramaturgy and dance dramaturgy is the different ways of working, though theater is also not always mostly based on text, of course, but not always, because there is a post-dramatic theater, which there is a theater which developed like in some other ways than just based on the text. So could you somehow tell us about how the dance dramaturg works? I mean, in very, very practical cases and examples, what he or she do.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, maybe just to give a little bit context, I mean, it's exactly right what you're saying, that also like in Germany, where dramaturgy or theater dramaturgy somehow was invented, if I can say that, late in the 18th century, where the profession of the dramaturg in the theatrical context was established in Hamburg. So it had also in Germany, it has a very strong tradition, and mostly indeed in the German context. While in dance, it actually, I think the first time, I'm not sure if this is somehow also a little bit like just a story or if it's actually true, but some people say that Pina Bausch actually had the first person that called himself, in this case, dance dramaturg. So that was in the 60s. So it's quite a new profession, but that time also still deriving very much from the theatrical knowledge, because Pina Bausch, as you know, she made this dance theater very much. Dance dramaturgy in the way how I or many colleagues of my generation executed in a way is something that kind of derived, I think, still from a certain tradition of theater, but still relating much more to the needs of the free dance scene. That is exactly as you say, that there's somehow pieces always derive from a new thematic field, but never like a base that is already there. There's never an existing text, there's never like an existing idea, but you kind of always create something anew. But I think it also kind of derived from the need to kind of understand more this relation between the artwork and the audience. I don't know if probably you have also encountered very much that dance always has this seemingly problem that people say, I don't understand dance. You know, I don't understand the movement in a way, and so this kind of problem you can encounter almost everywhere. And I think there's, on the one hand, of course, that's also like an educational problem in a way, like how our society moves more and more far away from understanding the body as something that can also express things. But it's at the same time also maybe about the art world, or like artists themselves sometimes not understanding or knowing anymore how much they are taking part in moving society forward with what they do. You know, sometimes I feel like that also the art field itself forgets this capacity, that if there's one element that moved society always forward more than anything else, more than science and so on, it's art. Always. But I think we also tend to forget this capacity. And I think this is just like a general context in which I feel dance dramaturgy probably became somewhat more popular in the last 15 years or 20 years. I think, like, to your question now, like the practice of it, I have to say I'm hesitant to kind of name like one or two like clear examples of how it's done, because while theater dramaturgy, you maybe have certain tools because there's a text somehow and you can apply always certain tools to it for the theater. In dance dramaturgy, it's exactly as we already said, it always derives from the very work. That means there can be very different themes. There are very different people involved, and with that also very different skills and expertise. And it's always for every production anew about kind of putting all those things into a certain game together as relation management. And in that sense, I have to say, with every production, somewhat it's about different ways of working. You always establish a new way of working. And I think this is maybe also a capacity of dance dramaturgy that that first of all, you have a curiosity for the work that is done. And you have a curiosity in the sense that it's not trying to make your own work out of it, but helping the work of the artist. I don't know if you, just to make it a bit practical, quite often probably you do production and you invite some colleagues to give feedback. Could be another choreographer. And quite often it happens that the other choreographer gives you kind of somehow, I would do it like this. And I simplify it a little bit. And this is what a dance dramaturg would not do. Because it's not about my idea. And my idea doesn't help you. You want to do your work, not the work of the other in a way. So it's much more kind of trying to always find a way to feed, but also criticize and reflect on the idea of, you as an artist in a way. And this, I think this is kind of one basic element that differentiates it from many other critical practices in a way. Oh God, I could say, I feel like I talk a lot. I could say so much more, but maybe
okay.
that's good.
Yeah. It's okay. It's very interesting. It's somehow that works, looks for me like the works of somehow psychiatrist, therapist in the art, like the person who's trying to help artists to understand the connection between what artists create in terms of movement, for example, if it's dance, and its own, perception of the world or whatever, what is inside and what is outside, because as I told, it's somehow connected with me with this therapist work, like why I feel, depressed or happy or whatever, and how it's connected with all of my relationships with the world around me. So could we say that dance dramaturgy somehow trying to, if you told about the connection between the work and audience, so it's kind of trying to fill in the gap in this understanding and kind of try to help the audience get really what the artist want to say, or to clarify the message or whatever.
I think it is in a way kind of on one hand to guard the artistic concept, really to guard it in a way, and to kind of also help that you kind of, if you have like an artistic idea, to on one hand kind of help the artist to stick to it and to not compromise too much. You know that like towards the premiere you always have to compromise anyway, because there are certain limitations technically and so on. But it's on one hand to really guard the concept, and sometimes also to guard it in front of the artist, him or them herself. Because sometimes you can get lost with so many kind of different ideas, or you want to do too many things at the same time. So in that sense, it's on one hand here to guard it, but then of course it is also about thinking about how to kind of contextualize it. And that means on one hand, from the artistic perspective, again, also to find ways that the work stays always important for more than yourself. Because if you do like an artwork for yourself as an artist, I don't need to see it as an audience. Then it's therapy or whatever you want to call it. So it's kind of always kind of trying to also bring in the perspective of, I would just call it like more than yourself. But then for the from the audience perspective, it also means it's not about kind of explaining them what it is, because if you want to educate people, you should become a teacher. It's much more about kind of just leaving enough space for the audience to make up their own mind on what they see. So, and that kind of course, means on one hand also for the work again to understand that there's always like enough space, let's say, for the audience to kind of, exactly make up their own mind and to think about it. But at the same time, it's of course also to give the right tools for the audience to kind of find their way into that. And that is like classical things that we all know, and that of course quite often don't really work, but we try continuously, the program text or after talks and so on, you know, all these kind of strategies that you have, which is of course also part of the dramaturgical work in a way. But there I feel like quite often at the same time also I'm a little bit critical. I think we have to constantly also ask ourselves, okay, how do we do it and how much is also enough? Quite often I feel like a little bit too much, and then we actually kind of, just an example, like after talk is for me quite often very interesting, that you have like a conversation after a work, and there's sometimes the curator sitting and the artist, and there's a conversation on such a level happening that doesn't involve an audience anymore, that is not part of the field and doesn't know maybe the words and so on. That's how you exclude the audience, for example. I just give that example because you know. This, but I feel like it's also sometimes maybe in the works that, maybe if I can just maybe to provoke also a little bit like a conversation among us, like remembering the Ukrainian dance platform in Vilnius. For me, what I sometimes thought, like as an average in the works, there is a tendency also to sometimes try to do a little bit too much, because you maybe are afraid that the audience might not understand. But I think that doing a little bit less or showing a little bit less will help even more, also for the audience to kind of really get what you want, you know, to sense it, to feel it in their own body, in a way. That I just say that to steer maybe a bit of conversation around us.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to do. The next question more closer to the context we've been we're going to talk about, the kind of what you saw and what you can say actually about you've seen at in Vilnius, because I also understand that it is quite difficult for me specifically when people asking me. Just 2 days ago I've been watching some dance works, and then choreographers came and they kind of ask for feedbacks, and for me it's always very problematic because of the reason that you told. If they could, because I don't know what they wanted to do, and I'm not going to propose them my ways to do the work as I see it, because I'm also a choreographer, and kind of the first idea is to say, oh, I would do it like this or like that, but they are not should be interested in what way I'm going to do this, because it's they do it their ideas. So it's very important, especially when you just see works and you don't know anything about the artist background, about how this idea came and whatever. You just say nothing. Just only if would artist ask me something like, would you program my work for your festival? I have an answer for this. I could say yes, because of this, or not because of this, or something else. But given the evaluation of the work that artists did, it's very, very kind of difficult. So what could you say about in general, what you've seen, what you feel relevant to say now? We have Rita Lira with us whose works you've seen.
Yes.
Yeah, and Maria Salo, she was pitching her work. Lesia, also with us, Lesia Kikuatova, she was a dancer in the work Dance Macabre.
Yeah.
And she was also a choreographer of that work. Maybe if they have their own specific questions, not just what do you think about the work?
Yeah.
If you could give some more general overview what you've seen, and then maybe the choreographers would have some questions to you.
Yes, of course. First of all, just general to just support or underline what you just said, that because I think that's quite important that I mean, exactly this kind of difficulty that you talk about, this is something that I encounter a lot. And I think this is also a capacity of, or should be a capacity of dance dramaturgy to somehow have a capacity to, and it doesn't need to be elaborated at all. It can be super simple, but to talk about what you have seen or experienced. Seen is actually also a wrong word, because we know that dance is more than just visual art. By the way, but yeah, anyway, we know what we talk about when I say scene. But this capacity, but I think it's also, again, general. I don't know if what you experience now is, since many of you kind of at the moment, unfortunately have to, but maybe also want to kind of live in the Western European context. I don't know if you have already encountered that, how little people talk about the work that they have just seen. Like, I don't know if you had the chance to kind of go to different festivals or like theaters, and quite often you stand there and afterwards and people talk about everything but not about the works anymore. So we kind of also generally lose more and more the capacity to discourse, and I think this is also maybe because this general lack of critical discourse in the society, everything becomes more and more polarized, you know. And I think we should not take part in that, but in a way we do. So, but of course, it's also something that one has to kind of learn to simply just talk about what you just have experienced. That's all in a way, you know. And if we do that, yeah. But of course, it is always a little bit difficult because there's sometimes also way like it's sensitive matters, you know, like the artworks are very dear to ourselves. We give our heart into it. But I think this is just a matter also of kind of finding like appropriate ways. But in general, there just one last thing to this general thing, but for me, it's just very important, this topic. I think, and I don't know if you all would agree with me or not, but I think what you would prefer is someone telling you something honest than nothing. In a way, you know, like, and honest doesn't mean mean. But it means like to talk about, you know, and then, you know, so yeah, this is just, it was just important for me this point, because I totally agree with you, Anton. This is a really big topic, actually. Like, how do we talk about things? More specific to the Ukrainian dance platform. I mean, for me, what I really, really appreciate, what I really, really, really love to see, that was like from all the work. And I think I have mentioned that also already with some of you, that what I could really see is urgency. And I mean urgency not in the sense that everything now, there's a war now, so we have to talk about the war. This is not, that's not what I mean, but that there's each one of you has a need to express something for exactly more than yourself. You know, you want to state something. And you want to provoke something, and that's something what I really appreciated to see across the program, because I feel that's something that quite often lacks in different contexts in a way. In the Berlin context, I quite often feel, and I might sit myself now in a hot pot, but it doesn't matter, whoever's listening here. But I feel like that quite often. In the Berlin context, it's so much you do really works for yourself or your own bubble in a way. You know, of course, we have a very strong queer discourse, also the queer body, you know, questioning that. But if you show these works just among your queer peers, it will not reach anyone in a way, you know. And that's some of what I really appreciated in all the works that I've seen, this kind of like to really steer discussions beyond the edges, and not only about war, but also about the body in emergency, different states of emergency, the body also as a weapon, movement as weapon, and so on and so forth. That I really liked. And then in general, maybe from a more critical perspective, is I think that exactly what I thought, that to me sometimes it feels like that, yeah, there's the need, and this maybe comes also from the context in which, as like the Ukrainian context, that I know a little bit only from one visit and seeing a few works here and there, so I cannot say much, but it is maybe that I think that in the Ukrainian dance context, it's overall so much more traditional, that like in the works that you do, if you still have to also fight so much certain patterns, structures, ways of dramaturgy in a way that you get taught in academical context in a way. So how to there's a lot about this fight, and still it feels like that a lot is kind of also still derived from him. So like to explain things very strongly, or to kind of repeat something like in 3 different ways just to make it really clear, or and so on and so forth. This kind of where I would feel like, maybe it's not necessary, because I think I already understood it in a way, and the feeling that it left with me is really good, actually. But of course, sometimes it's also it's always like up for discussions also.
Yeah, that's what you said. It's the last one. It's very interesting, because that's really the thing about the dance education in so-called contemporary dance in Ukraine. That's I remember it very well. In a lot of kind of exams or like students' work showings, when at the end the teacher or say, I didn't understand anything, what it was about, what you wanted to say. So that's kind of, since being a student, people got this idea that they have to be very clear in what they wanted to say, so nobody would blame them. So that's, nobody understand what it's about. So you should develop the dramaturgy in terms of theater, like a story which is clear. And then if it's not, if, as we say, no, that's you shouldn't do this, you can build it any other way, but then how to build it the other way if not making a story? So this way we come to the question of dance dramaturgy again. Back. So how to build this dramaturgy inside, and what it is then, if it's not theater thing, like the beginning, the development, the catharsis, and then the end. So
but I think also it goes to the body, because I feel like also that's something that I also really liked a lot, as a first of all, like also like the handcraft, the physical handcraft, but also there I feel like I really like the way how you kind of, I think in almost all the works also questioned the way how the body should express itself, like, because in the tradition, and I think your work, for example, talks about that, like how the traditional work and the traditional discipline, and also certain gestures that you should do in order to be understood, and kind of going beyond that to kind of find a different body that equally can be understood if you just allow it. But of course, the traditional traditional academics, they want to see certain gestures because that's how you do it. The ballerina jumping that high kind of expresses her joy, or expresses, blah, 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 very simplified now. But there's something more than that. And that's something that I also really liked in all the works, that to question that very much. But you can also see that fight. I have to say, you can see, like, for me, the whole platform was about also, you saw that fight also, against the tradition, against Russia, against many different things. You know, there was a lot of fight, but with proposing also in very nice ways new approaches.
The most important thing that it's better to say less than more. Yeah. And my question is, what is the first 3 questions that you ask choreographer when you start to work on new piece with he or she, and what you will never ask? I mean, like during this process.
The last one I can answer easier. I think what I always try to avoid, I don't always manage, but what I try to avoid is to ask why. Because I feel like if you ask a why question, it's quite often easy to respond to just with, well, because, you know, and why also always puts you into a certain defense mode. And I think and generally we talk, again, I feel like we talk so much about trying to understand, why is she doing that, you know, and with that we kind of tend to forget to look at what is the work actually doing, which is much more interesting. For example, exactly again this example that Anton brought up, you know, that like this kind of trying to find the story in the dance, you know, in the academic context, it's so much based on, but why is she moving that? And why when the teacher asks you that, she kind of doesn't look at, but what is the body doing? You know, and to kind of open a new window. So yeah, I always try to avoid the why. The first questions that yeah, it's very, I don't know, I cannot really answer because it kind of depends very much, but I think in general it is just about yeah, what do you want to do? Very simple in a way. But or to put it somehow, maybe to answer it to you in a very different way. You know that here in European context, quite often, not everywhere, and in France it's also a little bit different. I know you are based in France at the moment, but you have, like, you apply for project fundings quite often. And I just give this example more because I think in the project funding, this kind of application, you have to always put together your idea, what do you want to do and what do you want money for. And there, maybe there are like 3 kind of key questions that maybe with that I can answer you. And it's always like, okay, what are you doing? How are you doing it? And how could it look like? Also, and what are you doing always means kind of like, yeah, just to kind of explain a little bit the idea. How are you doing is to explain a little bit the tools with like, you know, the tools that you use in order to kind of work on the idea. As that means, like, is there a certain style that you would like to work with, or would you like to kind of use certain props, or I don't know what you know, all this kind of elements, but mostly also to express a little bit like the choreographic language or the interest, what kind of movement language or body you would like to research on. And then how it could look like is quite often to just give an impression of how you visualize the work at the moment. It doesn't necessarily mean that you need to know already how it looks like in the end, but like, how do you imagine it for now? And I feel like these are somehow like 3 key questions that quite often are already not easy to answer. But maybe this gives you an answer in a way, I hope.
Thank you, yeah.
Any other questions? Not so many. Okay.
I don't have, sorry, Anton. Yeah, if
Yeah,
I can.
yeah, please. Yes,
yeah,
of course.
Thank
Yes,
you.
you can.
Thank you so much for organizing this, and thank you so much for a great lecture to be here today with us. I don't have any question. Unfortunately, I missed the Ukrainian contestant there, but I watched some videos. It was amazing, and thank you so much for fighting it so hard and for doing this. And I just want to share my own experience, because we talked today a lot about these important things, and teachers, how they teach us, and then dramaturgy, how it's working. And I was lucky to be in Kungliga Balletopran, which is in Stockholm, and I saw an amazing. I'm not sure. It's not a ballet, but it's kind of, you know, theater performance. Let's say like this. What was done by Alexander Ekman, and it has name as escapist, I think. So like someone who run from, I don't know, from duty or whatever. And it was like 2 hours and a half, and it was quite amazing because he worked in a way, as you exactly mentioned, like he worked a lot with dramaturgy and all these things and choreography also. But honestly, I did not understand at all. It was like, and I am a choreographer myself, but it was so strange because, you know, in the middle of, I still remember that, it shocked me a lot. And by the way, Swedish people, they really like it so much. So like Applaudes was just great after the end, and no one was, you know, going home and everything. It was a premiere actually. But I really did, like, you know, some parts I did understand, like how person is escaping of his duties, for example, or something. But then I still remember in the middle of the performance, he was staying and brushing his teeth for like 10 minutes without any kind of, you know, happening. And there was like a big screen, which was, you know, showing, I don't know, just same routine over and over and over. And like I got the point, but you know, the rest of the performance was really crazy. So it was like one person dancing, then like 2-person dancing, then like 500-person dancing, you know, and it's like, and I was like, what? Like how you could? It's exactly the thing, like, you know, when you're doing choreography for yourself or for the audience, or like, what is your goal? And I'm like, sure, he asked some friends, what do you understand from this? And I'm not sure they really understand something. But I just want to, I remember that experience while you was talking about this important thing.
I mean, first of all, I think that, like, just to say that for dance dramaturgy is not the magic that helps everything to become better in a way. You know? That's like, that this is not okay. But I think exactly that what you just like that we talk about it, you know, that to share like this experience, and then we can talk about maybe someone else has seen it. Like this is kind of the important thing, and because that kind of steers things. Another important thing that you mentioned is also that, which I find also very important, that you always have to understand the work from a certain context. And I mean, for me, like it kind of also helped a little bit to know, like just this little bit that I know from the Ukrainian context helped me also to navigate even better through the Ukrainian dance platform, you know, kind of understanding where it comes from. I don't believe in dance as a universal language. It doesn't make sense because, like, you know, when you kind of when you travel a little bit across, just across Europe even, or, you know, you see how different gestures can be perceived, to give you like an obvious example, and so on. So in that sense, this question of, okay, in which context do we work ourselves into also is always relevant. And that also applies to, okay, when you want to kind of tour a work, to also see, okay, what does the very audience there need in order to be able to understand it. This is like just the other topic that you kind of mentioned also, that of course there might be things discussed that are maybe harder for you to understand, while at the same time I believe also, I think I know this work actually, I also find it problematic. But this is another thing, you know, it's just that they are dance dramaturgs, it doesn't mean that it's good. I don't know, honestly. I think that I don't know, from all the works that I have been involved in, I think it's not even half that where I myself would say, oh wow, yes, that's, you know, really good. And that's also it's also, you know, we are all humans working in it, so
thank you very much. Actually, unfortunately, we have to finish, as we talked with Thomas that we will have meeting from 10 to 11 European time, Central European time. Now it's 1 minute past 11. So it was my fault again. Sorry for all our participants. I was late, a bit confused about date and time. We can probably continue working about the dramaturgy and whatever with Thomas, if Thomas is okay later, if there will be requests from the Ukrainian choreographers, our participants who is here today or whoever else, we would be happy to continue as to educate and to promote dance for Ukrainian choreographers in European context is one of the goal of our organization. So
Yeah.
thank you very much
My
to
pleasure.
all
But just to
participants
say
and-
one thing,
yeah.
if I may say, also for me, also, as first of all, yeah, that would be my pleasure, but also again as I also, if you remember from the platform, I think there's a lot that but also others, we can learn from your very context. You remember I asked you all, what can we learn from you in a way? And I feel like that's this kind of, this exchange is also very important. So yeah, it would be my pleasure. And thanks for the invitation again, Anton. I appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Thank you so
Have
much.
a good day.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.